In the 2nd century BC, while the Roman Republic was busy conquering the Mediterranean, another superpower was cementing its rule in the East. The Han Empire was a marvel of the ancient world, a civilization of vast wealth, ironworking, and agricultural mastery. From the outside, it looked invincible. But behind the towering walls of its capital, Qian, the Han emperors lived in fear. They harbored a dark, humiliating secret. Their empire was being held for ransom. To the north, beyond the Great Wall, lay the endless steppes. This was the domain of the Xiongnu, a terrifying confederation of nomadic warriors. Born in the saddle and armed with powerful composite bows, the Xiongnu were the ancient world's ultimate apex predators. They were the predecessors to the Huns and the Mongols, and their cavalry could strike without warning and vanish like ghosts. Decades earlier, the founding emperor of the Han Dynasty was surrounded and nearly annihilated by a massive Xiongnu army. Since that traumatic defeat, the Han Empire had been forced into a humiliating policy known as Huqian, appeasement. For 70 years, Chinese emperors had to send their own princesses to marry Xiongnu warlords, along with massive annual tributes of silk, grain, and gold. It was extortion on an imperial scale. A desperate payoff just to keep the borders from burning. But in 141 BC, a young, fiercely ambitious emperor took the throne. Emperor Wu. He had enough of buying false peace. He wanted to destroy the Xiongnu once and for all. But to defeat an empire of horsemen, he needed allies who hated the Xiongnu as much as he did. Emperor Wu's spies brought him a rumor. Far to the west, beyond the deserts, lived a powerful nomadic tribe called the Wedji. Years ago, the Xiongnu had crushed the Wedji, slaughtered their king, and in a gruesome display of dominance, turned his skull into a drinking cup. Forced into exile, the Wedji were out there somewhere, nursing a blood feud. An alliance with the Wedji could catch the Xiongnu in a deadly two-front war. But there was a catch. To reach the Wedji, a Han envoy would have to cross the Hushi Corridor, a narrow, unforgiving strip of land completely controlled by the Xiongnu. It was a suicide mission. The emperor asked for a volunteer. Out of the thousands of high-ranking nobles and seasoned generals, only one man stepped forward. A minor palace attendant, an ordinary man named Zhang Qian. Armed with 100 guards, a loyal Xiongnu guide named Ganfu, and the Jie, an imperial staff made of bamboo and yak hair symbolizing the authority of the emperor, Zhang Qian rode out of the gates of Chang'an. He was supposed to be gone for a few months. He had no idea that he was walking into 13 years of hell, and that his footsteps would forever alter the course of human history. Leaving the safety of the Han border behind, Zhang Qian's caravan stepped into the unknown. They entered the Hushi Corridor, a narrow, unforgiving strip of desert that served as the highway of the ancient world. It was completely controlled by the Xiongnu. And they didn't make it far. Out of the howling dust came the Xiongnu cavalry. Fast, lethal, and overwhelming. The Han delegation, a mix of diplomats and lightly armed guards, stood no chance. They were captured, bound, and dragged deep into the freezing Mongolian steppes to face the supreme leader of the nomads, the Chunchen Xiongnu. Zhang Qian expected to be executed. But the Xiongnu was a master of psychological warfare. He knew that killing the envoy would just be a brief moment of violence. But keeping him alive, breaking his spirit, and forcing him to bow to the Xiongnu, that would be the ultimate humiliation for the Han Emperor. So, the Xiongnu placed Zhang Qian in a gilded cage of the steppe. He wasn't locked in a dungeon. Instead, he was forced to live among his enemies. He was given a flock of sheep. He was dressed in their furs. The Xiongnu even gave him a Xiongnu wife, with whom he eventually had children. Year after year passed. The brutal winters gave way to brief, beautiful summers. To the Xiongnu guards, Zhang Qian looked like a broken man who had accepted his fate. He spoke their language flawlessly. He was a father, a herdsman, a man of the steppe. The plan to erase his identity was working. But they were wrong. In the West, we have tales of prisoners of war surviving years of torture. But Zhang Qian's torment was different. It was the temptation of comfort. It would have been so easy to forget his impossible mission and just live out his days with his new family. Yet, every single day, for 10 agonizing years, Zhang Qian held on to his jie, the imperial staff of the Han Emperor. The yak hair on the staff rotted and fell off. The bamboo was polished smooth by his hands. He kept it hidden, a silent act of absolute defiance. His body belonged to the Xiongnu, but his soul belonged to Chang'an. He was just waiting for the guards to look away. And finally, after a decade of captivity, that moment came. As the Xiongnu relaxed their watch, Zhang Qian and his most loyal companion, the Xiongnu archer Ganfu, slipped into the darkness of the night. Now, any normal man who had just escaped 10 years of slavery would have jumped on a horse and ridden east, desperate to return home to safety. But Zhang Qian was not a normal man. When he looked at the stars to find his bearings, he didn't point his horse east toward China. He pointed it west. Into the deep, unknown abyss of Central Asia. 10 years later, his mission had just begun. By turning west, Zhang Qian and his small band of survivors chose a path that would have broken any ordinary army. They were entering a geographical nightmare. To their right was the Taklamakan Desert, a sea of death so vast that its name literally translates to, "Go in, and you won't come out." To survive, they had to skirt the desert's edge, only to face an even greater obstacle: the Pamir Mountains, the roof of the world. This was a death march through freezing altitudes. Men and horses succumbed to frostbite, starvation, and the invisible killer of altitude sickness. A place where the very air betrays your lungs. But when they finally stumbled down from the icy peaks into the Fergana Valley, Zhang Qian was stunned. He had spent 10 years among the nomadic Xiongnu. expecting the entire Western world to be nothing but tents and grass. Instead, he saw something entirely different. He saw walled cities. He saw vast fields of wheat and vineyards. He had discovered a sophisticated, agricultural civilization. The kingdom of Daiwen. And more importantly, he saw the horses. The locals called them heavenly horses. To modern breeders, they are known as the Akhal-Teke. Tall, muscular, with a metallic coat that shimmered in the sun, and a legendary stamina that supposedly made them sweat blood. To Zhang Qian, these weren't just animals. They were the ultimate weapon. With horses like these, the Han cavalry could finally outrun and destroy the Xiongnu. The king of Daiwen, impressed by the Han envoy, provided guides to help Zhang Qian continue south. He crossed the Oxus River and entered a land called Bactria. And it is here that our story reaches one of the most mind-blowing crossovers in human history. When Zhang Qian walked through the bustling markets of Bactria, he didn't realize it. But he was standing in the shadows of Alexander the Great. Over 2 centuries earlier, Alexander's armies had conquered this region, leaving behind garrisons that evolved into the Greco-Bactrian kingdoms. As a Han Chinese diplomat, Zhang Qian was looking at Hellenistic architecture. He was touching silver coins stamped with the Greek alphabet and the faces of Greek kings. He saw glass from Alexandria, and elephants from India. The East and the West, separated by thousands of miles of deadly deserts and mountains, had finally touched. Zhang Qian realized a profound truth. China was not the only civilized empire in the world. There was a vast, interconnected network of nations out there, rich in resources and hungry for trade. He still needed to find the wedgie to complete his military alliance. But in that moment, in the Greek-influenced markets of Bactria, the seed for something far greater than war was planted. The idea of the Silk Road was born. After crossing hell on earth, Zhang Qian finally achieved the impossible. He found the wedgie. He stood before their leaders, presented the Han Emperor's proposal, and asked them to join a massive, two-front war to annihilate the Xiongnu. And their answer was no. It was a crushing anticlimax. You see, the wedgie had been driven out of the barren steppes, only to stumble into the rich, fertile lands of Bactria. They had conquered the remnants of the Greeks, settled down, and were living in absolute luxury. Why would they give up this paradise to march thousands of miles back into the freezing cold just to fight a bloodthirsty enemy? Zhang Qian stayed for over a year, trying desperately to convince them. But it was useless. On paper, his military mission was a total failure. It was time to go home. Knowing the Xiongnu controlled the northern routes, Zhang Qian decided to take a southern detour through the Tibetan Plateau, a region controlled by the Qian tribes. He thought he was safe. He was wrong. In a cruel twist of fate, the Qian had recently allied with the Xiongnu. Just as he was nearing the borders of his homeland, Zhang Qian was ambushed and captured. Again. By the exact same enemy. Just over a year into his second captivity, the supreme leader of the Xiongnu, the Xiongnu, suddenly died. The nomad empire erupted into a violent civil war over the succession. In the chaos, Zhang Qian, his Xiongnu wife, and his loyal archer Ganfu mounted their horses and rode for their lives. In 125 BC, a small, exhausted group of riders approached the gates of Chang'an. 13 years had passed since a young diplomat marched out with over 100 men. Now, only 2 of the original mission returned. Zhang Qian and his guide, Ganfu. When Zhang Qian knelt before Emperor Wu, he held up his jie, the imperial staff. There was no yak hair left on it. It was just a polished bamboo stick. But it was the ultimate symbol of unbroken loyalty. Zhang Qian told the emperor that the Wedgie had refused the alliance. But then, he began to unroll a map in his mind. He spoke of Daiwen and their heavenly horses. He spoke of the Greek-influenced cities of Bactria, the riches of India, and an entire world of trade and empires lying just beyond the deserts. He didn't bring back an army. He brought back the greatest intelligence report in ancient history. Armed with this knowledge, Emperor Wu changed the world. He launched massive military campaigns to drive the Xiongnu out of the Heshi corridor. He secured the routes west, seeking those heavenly horses to build an invincible cavalry. And in doing so, he laid down the tracks for a global trade network. Because of a prisoner who refused to break, silk began to flow out of China, and the world began to flow in. Zhang Qian didn't just walk a path. He paved the Silk Road. History is often written by conquerors and kings. But sometimes, it's shaped by a single man's relentless willpower to just keep walking.